One of the newest and most increasingly popular genres of horror is analog horror, and it's brought a whole new concept to what we find scary on the internet. Or at least it did before it all kind of became the same. If you're a fan of these videos, you'll probably recognize the normal VHS tape until something goes wrong, music cuts out, and a creepy distorted face glitches in trope. Once you've seen a few of these, the scare factor starts to wear off. But why? And why are people saying that it's ruined? Let's dive into analog horror and take a look at the good and the bad. Analog horror as we know it today has its roots all the way back in 2006, with the iconic Wyoming Incident, a video uploaded to YouTube claiming to show a recent TV hijacking in Wyoming, which was inspired by many of its past, like the Captain Midnight hijacking and the Max Headroom Incident. The Wyoming Incident was an ARG like nothing else of its kind, and was presented as completely genuine. The lore of it spans very, very far, and is much more than I can even begin to explain here. All you really need to know is the Wyoming Incident shows video of a hijacking that was explained to have very bad physical and psychological effects on the people who were unfortunate enough to view it. This captured people's imagination for years, but was seen as an independent thing. It wouldn't yet be classified as anything other than just a creepy YouTube video or a real-life event, since people weren't sure whether or not it actually happened, and some still aren't to this day. Interestingly enough, some of the classic weird/creepy side of YouTube videos would totally be considered analog horror if released today. Think of things like Agamemnon Counterpart, or you're not gonna like the way I pronounce this, Krajina Grisbao? I don't know. Or the creepy tape found in Croatia. It was clear that this format had really strong impact and served to really creep people out, with an audience most likely comprised of millennials and early Gen Z. This is an interesting look into the audience of the genre and really what makes it work. Analog horror really started off officially with the series Local 58, created by Chris Straub, who also created one of the most iconic and classic creepypastas ever, and that being Cannibal Cove. I have a feeling that if Cannibal Cove was released today, it would be kind of in the analog horror format, which I think would actually be pretty amazing if I'm being honest. Like, if the production value was there, it would be really cool. Regardless, Local 58 was like nothing else for a lot of people. It was new, scary, and unnerving, and it had a creepy story that wasn't fully easy to understand upon your first viewing. The series was truly great, and really set out to establish an entire genre of horror after it. However, it had its downsides. Many people who set out to create their own analog horror basically just made Local 58, but, worse, and just not made as well. People still liked it since it tapped into that same nostalgic horror that people loved about the original. Analog horror was relatively popular for a little while, but really blew up around 2020. And this was for good reason. Since the world was shut down, lots of people had tons and tons of time to really just let their creativity shine through, and led to some truly incredible stuff. Back in early 2020, a YouTuber by the name of Sagan Hawks made a video series covering a new analog horror series. This one was based off Five Nights at Freddy's, which was one of the first times that an analog horror series used a pre-existing IP. The series was created by Squimpus McGrimpus, and needless to say, it was really awesome. It completely recaptured that magic and horror that the first Five Nights at Freddy's games had, that has pretty much been lost in modern Five Nights at Freddy's. The fact is that when done right, analog horror is truly amazing, and can be some of the creepiest forms of horror, especially in the Five Nights at Freddy's sense. People fell in love with Five Nights at Freddy's because of the first 2 to 3 games. These really captured the vibe so well, and they blew up for a reason, but the series kind of lost its path. From my point of view, it's kind of because they tried to appeal to kids more, and a lot of it turned into more marketing, and the story got kind of overcomplicated and less scary. The designs of the robots got more and more terrifying and advanced, while inadvertently just making them less and less scary, since the fact that they were creepy and run down and realistic is really what made them scary in the first place. So this analog horror series really recaptured the original vibe, and people adored it. Of course, this is the internet, so people started to make their own videos, whether it was just to capitalize off the fame of the other ones, or as a genuine creative venture, really just depended on the video. Something huge that came out of that was a little series by the name of The Walton Files. Inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's, The Walton Files follows a restaurant by the name of Bond's Burgers, and had a completely unique story. Some of these videos spanned around 60 minutes long, which was unprecedented for the subgenre. Now, those familiar with this series know that there's a lot of story to explain, so for the sake of staying on topic and this video's length, I suggest that you watch someone else's video covering the topic, since there are many videos talking about it and explaining it better than I ever could. Series like The Walton Files ended up amassing their own fan bases, which further spread analog horror to the overall mainstream. At this point, analog horror started to become a point of overall internet vernacular. This was amazing for everyone who was creating these series, and great for consumers. However, this is where the problem started. Like the vast majority of things who get popular on the internet, they get oversaturated and watered down for mass audiences. What once had a more niche appeal that wasn't necessarily the most accessible to everyone gets altered and ends up becoming more and more appealing to mass audiences. And of course, when one thing works, why wouldn't it work 100 more times? Well, that seems to be what a lot of people thought. Oversaturation is a very touchy subject, since in a lot of ways it's very subjective. There will always be people who end up loving the new stuff that comes out of a subject's fame, and the amazing new things that come because people found a new thing because it was popular and were inspired by it. And that's great. It's truly one of the most amazing things about something blowing up. However, in my opinion, the downsides outweigh the positives. Oversaturation starts to bring the rest of the good stuff down with it. Let's look at it like this. It's almost a numbers game. Your friends all want you to check out this brand new thing that everyone on the internet is talking about, so you do. You look it up and you watch 5 videos in the subgenre. One of them is absolutely incredible and really makes you see the potential in this art form, while the other 5 are sort of uniform, samey, and generally unoriginal. This would kind of give you an overall bad taste in your mouth, and it may make that entire subgenre feel kind of like bad or bland to you. This turns out to be a lot of people's actual experience, which is really unfortunate because there is a lot of really incredible stuff out there. A big part of why it became so oversaturated was because of the fact that analog horror is generally pretty easy to make, or at least in comparison to other subgenres. All you really need is an editing software and, a text-to-speech bot. The ease of creation meant that even if you didn't have a great concept, you could just take a popular thing and mash it with another thing, and then boom, new analog horror video. It wasn't long until everything looked exactly like this.
Welcome to the Mars 2112 training tape. Here you will be shown all the information you need for your new job. You have the honor of playing one of our friendly Martian friends, Empress Gloriana or Cutie Pie. Do not worry about Captain Orion. He is taken care of. When putting on the Martian suit, make sure you have closed the door to the training room. If you're the Empress, make sure your face is as blue as Neptune. Patrol the crystal crater and take pictures with the families. The families will love you. When you see Captain Orion in the crystal crater, do not approach him. Do not touch him. On Friday nights, make sure to say hello to our friends at the Star Bar. Your presence will make their journey unforgettable. If Captain Orion is there, leave him to his work. You may want to take a look into Cyber Street, and we understand. If you want to play a game of Mars hoops or throw some ice balls with a guest, feel free. If you see Captain Orion in the changing room, taking off his outfit, look away. If you perceive him, he will know. Stay away from the docking bay and gift shop. Being seen here will ruin the immersion for the guests.
Help me. They keep me here. I can't do this anymore. I want to be free. They keep me here. Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me.
Admittedly, that was fun to make, but you get the point. It's all kind of the same. If you're familiar with analog horror, you've seen that video I just made 100 times. Because it's all very much based on like 5 different series who did it very well, making it all feel the same. The shocking and unnerving distorted faces that was captured and mastered by the Mandela catalogs became a tired, overplayed, and most importantly, not scary trope. I don't know if this applies to everyone, but for me personally, horror kind of has a certain amount of times that it can really work for me. The first time you see something scary, it's at its most effective, but then the more you see it, the less scary it gets. For example, zombies. Zombies are a pretty terrifying concept. The bodies of the dead rising to attack the living while they rot and decay. It's an amazing concept, and when done right, can be horrifying. But here's the thing, there is an infinite amount of zombie media out there. Less so in the current day, but if you look at the early 2010s, zombies were absolutely inescapable. When I was about 12 years old, I got the House of the Dead 2 and 3 on the Wii, and I absolutely fell in love with both the game, but also the medium of zombie horror. Since then, I've watched tons of zombie movies, the entirety of The Walking Dead, for better and definitely for worse, and I've become a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise. But here's the thing, zombies really don't scare me, like, at all. I'm obsessed with the medium and the ideas that come with zombie apocalypse stuff and how to survive it, but I'm not scared of zombies. Just because I'm not afraid of zombies, it doesn't mean that zombie media isn't scary. I think it's kind of similar for analog horror. The difference is that zombie media and most other horror genres and monsters have more substance than just the scare, whereas with some of the lesser quality analog horror stuff, the whole scare and substance is just the scary face and the fact that it's on a VHS and gets corrupted and there's creepy text-to-speech and all that stuff. You can only see a blue background with yellow text that seems to be either a TV broadcast or an instructional video from the 90s or 80s that's normal at first, but then there's something off, and then there's a black box, and there's a censor bar, and, you know, it was great when you first see it, right? But then you see it over and over and over and over again, and people don't really understand what made the original versions that scary, so it just ends up being kind of lame. At times it can feel like all the creativity has been zapped out of analog horror because people are just trying to ride the fame of other series that have done things like that. Like, okay, this series did that really well and is successful for it, so I might as well do the same thing. But the thing is that it kind of works. Audiences are ready and willing to consume this sort of content. And, you know, it's good for them, I guess. I just don't get it. So this leads me to the central point of this video. Has analog horror been ruined? Well, at least from my point of view, I don't think it has. I think that's a very reductive way to look at things. Just because there's a lot of bad content, that doesn't mean that it ruins an entire genre, and especially doesn't ruin the old series that inspired everything after that. However, I do understand the point of view that the genre's reputation has been kind of ruined. Let me explain. It's really a matter of hype and exposure. Imagine you're someone who doesn't really know much about analog horror, but you hear people talk about it a lot. Every other week there's a new video titled something like, "Why Scrumbo Bumbo is the scariest analog horror ever." And it's got like 2 million views. This will lead you to go and finally check some out, but then you realize it's all kind of the same thing. This sort of thing leads people to dislike the genre as a whole, and also be pretty annoyed by the fact that you can't really escape it on the internet. A big part of it is because analog horror and the people covering it are kind of in a symbiotic relationship. Like, obviously this isn't a critique of anyone, it's just how YouTube works. But like, let's say a new series comes out, and then a big YouTuber takes a look at it. Says, "Wow guys, this is the scariest video I've ever seen. This is the best analog horror ever." A bunch of people flock to this video, say it's the best thing ever, and then make their own versions, who end up also being the scariest analog horror ever because they build on things that made the other ones scary. The cycle continues and repeats because analog horror is a very, very profitable thing to discuss on YouTube. I'm predicting this video is probably going to do pretty well. I don't know, we'll see. But that really seems like the case to me. Another thing that kind of confuses people about the genre of analog horror is the demographic. Like, who is this stuff even for? Millennials or Gen X? You know, that would actually make the most sense, since those generations grew up with analog technology like VHS, CRT TVs, cassette tapes, the radio, and record players. But as it turns out, the fanbase skews much younger. Gen Z loves analog horror, and for half of us, it does make total sense. Many early Generation Z kids grew up at the tail end of analog tech's lifespan. VHS was being phased out, and quickly being replaced by DVD, but CRT still reigned supreme. It was a simpler time, before smartphones and modern social media, but a time where there was still technology that was good enough to deliver a memorable experience. And now experiencing this old form of media in early childhood that all but dissipated as you grew up can absolutely give this old tech kind of mystifying, nostalgic effect, which is ripe to be turned into horror. So the appeal to early Gen Z makes total sense, but what about younger Gen Z fans? Those born around 2006 to 2011? Well, that appeal could be from the fact that the tech is almost alien in nature, and therefore it's creepy. It could also be because they grew up with horror that heavily used analog tech like Five Nights at Freddy's, and creepypasta that used the classic haunted tape trope. The more puzzling demographic is definitely Generation Alpha, kids born from 2012 to current day. When it comes to Gen Z, lots of super popular analog horror actually came from teenagers. Kane Pixels was only 17 when he created his iconic Backrooms series, and Alex Kister was only 18 when he created the Mandela catalog. This genre is made for and by the new generation, which I think is pretty cool. Perhaps the fact that the content creators are, like, on the younger side appeals to younger kids subconsciously, or, and this is just my very boomery take on this, these younger kiddos don't really get the appeal of the genre, but more so like it because it's popular and their favorite YouTuber tells them that it's good. It could also be because they've grown up in a 1080p world, so seeing something that isn't necessarily in high definition has a big scare factor. So we've looked at the negative side of things, what makes this stuff not work and such, but I really don't want to leave it at just that. I want to take a look at some analog horror that I think is actually really, really good, unique, and effective. There are so many videos on YouTube that kind of just complain about things and don't give a solution or anything positive, and I don't want to do that here. To me, the best analog horror is that looks like it could come out of the real world. And this is usually because they're based off of something real that happened. Now, for those who don't know, back in 1999, Burger King had to recall a Pokeball toy because it killed multiple children. But How? You see, basically, it was a ball that split into two and there was a little Pokemon figure inside. But there weren't any air holes in the sides of the ball. That meant that babies could put it over their nose and mouth and suck in, which would lead them to suffocate. And this actually happened twice, and it's incredibly unfortunate. Initially, Burger King refused to stop selling the toy after the first child's death, but after more death and injury occurred, they were forced to. The US Consumer Product Safety Commission pressured them to actually recall it, and so they did. TVs around America were shown this recall video.
Burger King and the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission want you to know about the voluntary recall of this Pokemon Pokeball. The ball may pose a suffocation hazard to children under 3. Throw the ball away or return it to Burger King. The safety of your child is of the utmost importance to us.
From my point of view, this video was incredibly creepy, in a really, really cool way. But I wasn't around to experience it when it happened. Imagine the fear and kind of shock that you would see. As a kid in the 90s, back when Pokemania was at its fullest, and you hear that that kids' meal toy that you just got recently was being recalled. The way that it just ominously sits there among a black background, with unmoving text and a creepy voice narrating the whole thing is truly, truly unintentional horror done right. And so it's inspired a lot of analog horror going forward, and when it's done right, it works. So let's take a look at the video by the name of Meat Product, Life Meat, analog horror short film. But here's the thing, life meat isn't exactly the best food option, but I've got a better one, and it's actually today's sponsor. So this video is sponsored, right? And it's a good one, Factor. Because Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever, because they deliver straight to your door. It's always dietitian approved, always fresh, never frozen, and honestly delicious meals. Their team of chefs uses high quality gourmet ingredients to make you feel your best all day long. And honestly, it works. Look, alright, I'm gonna be real with you. All the guys in the audience, we're not very good cooks. At least most of the time. Some of you are great cooks, and I respect that. But a lot of guys will just throw some, like, chicken tenders into the air fryer alongside, like, potatoes or something like that, and call it a day. And while that's great, there are better options, and Factor is one of them. Now, look, I got my YouTuber friends, right, who have done sponsorships for Factor. And I asked, like, is their stuff actually that good? And they're like, yeah, they told me it was restaurant quality. And so I tried it out myself, and yeah, no, it is. It's really good stuff.
It's good.
Yeah, it's actually really good. You should try this. Hold on. Look, we're busy people here, alright? It's a struggling economy. So for a lot of people, making a meal at the end of the day when you come back from work is a lot. And it is for me as well. As someone who works a lot, something like Factor is one of the most convenient things. I get home, put my meal up on the skillet for like 2 minutes, enjoy a delicious meal, and then I can relax for the rest of the night. I find that pretty great. Everything's pre-portioned, pre-seasoned, everything. You don't have to worry about chopping things up, clean up, nothing. Literally, put your thing in and then eat it. It's amazing. And as someone who is into fitness and staying healthy, it's a great option. Because the thing is, Factor offers options that make it easier to stick to my goals. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use Raymundo50 at checkout for an entire 50% off your first Factor box. The video is presented as sort of like a commercial/infomercial type thing, showing some different examples of meat meals, and then showing that the meat supply could fail very quickly if nothing's done about it. It looms in this shot of a dead field with a single cow skull in it, with an orange sky for a little too long for comfort, which is great. The voice then explains that the Universal Food Solutions Incorporated company has a solution to this problem, and that is life meat, a synthetic meat that tastes just like meat. It shows an example of the different types of meat that it shows. A little disclaimer on the bottom reads, "Caution, do not eat raw. Follow instructions labeled behind the can." We see a graphic of a life meat factory, and then the screen starts to glitch out. However, in a split frame, we actually see a skull and crossbones coming out of the factory. It then cuts to handheld footage. We then see someone seemingly dead on the floor, with their arm out and a spoon next to it. It seems that they didn't follow the rules and ate it raw. The camera zooms in on this arm, and we see that it's covered in these little, like, boils or warts. After a second, they all puff up, which is some of the most disgusting imagery I've seen in an analog horror video. I don't know why, but this gets me, and it's really, really cool. We then cut to a parody of the Pokeball recall. A very similar voice is explaining that live meat has been recalled because of an unknown pathogen. The voice explains that consumption of live meat is causing abnormal behaviors, occurrences, and deformities, and to dispose of it all immediately. It then glitches out to a Global Times newspaper reading, "Death meat plagues the US." For a split second, we actually get to see the little header of the article, which reads, "Life meat, a line of meat substitute products produced and manufactured by Universal Food Solutions Incorporated, the company behind Life Meat. A product that was once considered the potential cure to world hunger is now under intense scrutiny and questioning by US authorities after its products started a nationwide epidemic. Reports have been made of abnormal swelling, skin muscle deformation, mud mucus, and in most cases, severe illness and or death upon consuming Life Meat. Federal authorities and experts are now investigating what could be the cause of these strange and even deadly effects, with authorities questioning why this is happening now, almost 10 years after the product's introduction in the United States. It then cuts back to the original commercial. We then hear something weird. The original commercial claims that NASA's first manned mission to Mars is going to be provided with Life Meat for the astronauts. The ending line of the video is Life Meat, available now at supermarkets
everywhere.
So let's break that down for a second. We can get a kind of a rough timeline based on the visuals and the newspaper. At the end of it, it claims that Life Meat has been on the market for over 10 years. It's assumed that the Life Meat commercial we see is from around its launch. This would land at sometime during the late 70s or 1980s. This can also be judged by the NASA logo, which is the one that they had from 1975 to 1992. Meaning that the recall was probably sometime in the late 80s or 90s, which would follow with the Pokeball thing. It's really cool because it effectively sets out that this is an alternate universe, one where we were doing manned missions to colonize Mars, making this feel like a real artifact of something that you could have seen from an alternate universe, sort of like a extreme Mandela effect. Now, this does tie into current fears. I don't want to get conspiratorial or anything, but there's talk of making cloned meat, which is a synthetic form of meat that uses the genetic makeup of an actual animal. This way you can make more meat and kill less animals, and it's allegedly better for the environment. But people are really worried about this since they don't know the long-term effects of this. Same with products like Beyond and Impossible Meat, which, while delicious, aren't exactly the healthiest thing in the world, and people worry that they might have side effects in the future that we are completely unaware about now. This Life Meat video is such a good example of analog horror, because there's nothing objectively scary about it. There's no jump scare, there's no pop-up, it's just eerie enough, but feels real, and I think that's a big thing. So much analog horror just does not feel real at all, like it's just clearly fake and fictional and made to scare you. But when it's subtle enough that it doesn't feel like that, that's what actually makes it the scariest. Now, another incredible one is one by the name of Sweet Dreams NeuroCast. This video is created by Burger Scum and shows an infomercial talking about a product that claims to give you good dreams, introducing the Sweet Dreams NeuroCast sleep system. The infomercial explains how this product stimulates your brain in different areas so it can give you an authentic and real dream experience every night. Longer, clearer, and more profound and vivid dream. Now, this product sounds pretty great, honestly. I would love to have something that would always have me have good dreams and sleep well. But what's the issue? Well, probably not the best thing to have some sort of technology hacking into your brain and influencing it. This is seen shortly. We see a Pokeball recall style advertisement claiming that the product has been recalled. It says that prolonged use is leading to product dependence and neurological side effects, which, I mean, yeah, that would make sense. It then gives a number to call for if any of your loved ones are experiencing any of the following symptoms, such as difficulty concentrating, feeling disconnected from everyday life, being unable to recognize yourself in a mirror, distorted faces. This to me is one of the most effective uses of creepy, distorted faces in any analog horror series, and I don't know why, but these are so incredibly unnerving. And the fact that it's at the hands of a product that messes with your brain is really, really good stuff. It also says that if you encounter this person while you're using the product, do not approach or engage them. Use the emergency wake-up procedure provided with the NeuroCast. It then claims that this individual cannot follow you outside of the dream, and that if you do see them at any point, you're still dreaming. So that's terrifying, but it also provides a phone number to call. So let's give it a call.
Hottest talk line. Guys, hot ladies are waiting to talk to you. Press 1 now.
Okay. The number's the sexy girl chat line, as I just realized. Regardless of the funny troll there, it's still an incredibly effective video, and like I said, is one of the best uses of distorted creepy faces in anything, because there's so much build-up, and there's more kind of lore around it than just the scare there. Because the rest of the infomercial feels so authentic, it feels like something that I would have seen like at my grandma's house while watching TV late at night. It's really, really good, and for that reason, I think it's actually one of the best analog horror videos I have ever seen. But it's relatively obscure, so I'd advise that you check out the full video because it's really good. Now, the channel who uploaded it has its own analog horror sort of series by the name of Maple 7, which this is the trailer you're seeing for right now. You gotta check this out, it's good stuff, and plays on the same fear and high quality, genuine scariness that the NeuroCast video does. Now, another sort of interesting thing that's happening is analog horror satire. People are making videos kind of poking fun at the tropes that these series use, while still actually being, kind of creepy. The best example is Cystix, who I've made a video on before. He's got this entire series where he basically just gaslights the audience and lies in the analog horror format, and it's all actually done authentically, meaning he uses analog technology to film his videos and put it all together, which is really, really cool. Now, another incredible new sort of form of analog horror is Jurassic Park analog horror, which, as someone who loves these films, is an incredible, incredible new development in the subgenre. It's the first media I've seen, especially around Jurassic Park, that makes the dinosaurs genuinely scary and threatening, and it's incredibly cool. I'd actually highly recommend a video by the name of Dinosaurs plus Analog Horror is My Worst Nightmare by 4plus. It's really good and shares a lot of these great series. Now, since analog horror's been around for a while, it's kind of evolved and branched out in ways that people weren't expecting. Now, what I'm referring to is mainly digital horror, which in my opinion is kind of better than analog horror, but that's simply because I grew up with more digital technology and early internet YouTube type stuff, so it really hits hard for myself. Digital horror is fantastic, and is being used in ways that I couldn't have predicted. What initially seemed to be just parody of old YouTube videos evolved into horror around old Flash games. Lacey's games being an absolutely incredible example. This stuff is so awesome. And I can't really even give higher praise to digital horror. It's like really, really good stuff. And it's also much more obscure, meaning that it hasn't been oversaturated yet. Of course, at a point, it probably will become oversaturated. That's just the process of things. But now's the time to enjoy it while most of the content is really, really good. So, those are my thoughts on analog horror. It hasn't been ruined, but it's changed. And there's still a lot of good content around it. I want to give a huge thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you all in the next one, when we take a look at whether or not the backrooms have been fully ruined.